We talked about, people being able to meet and to collaborate from home, and I really should update this slide to say from anywhere. So it's not necessarily from home, it's not necessarily from the office, it's both, and it's any number of different locations in between, whether it's you're working, answering emails from a coffee shop, or you're going to pick up your kids from school and answering some messages from your cell, or wherever else you might be working. We want to encourage that experience to be foolproof across the board. And so oftentimes when we talk about sort of the collaboration aspect of this, and sort of talk about best practice recommendations of how we're supposed to meet and how we're supposed to be collaborative. The questions that I often get from sort of customers is, you have all of these different components with M365, whether it's Outlook or Yammer or Teams or SharePoint or OneDrive or all of these different kind of components. And so the question I often get is, well, where do we go to host what conversation, and where do we kind of start when we're looking at this platform as a whole? So I wanted to kind of kick things off by walking you through the concept of basically an inner versus outer loop when we're looking at this teamwork in Microsoft 365. And so on my screen in front of you here, you're going to see kind of a little bit about how that loop sort of plays out. On the left-hand side, obviously, we have Microsoft Teams. And so Teams is absolutely sort of the way of the future when you're looking at our larger productivity and collaboration strategy within Microsoft 365. And increasingly, I'm hearing this term kind of pop up at our different events and conferences, where we're not just talking about Teams, but we're talking about Teams as a platform. So of course that includes the ability to extend Teams either through DevOps or to extend it through Power Platform, so that we're looping this into not just kind of the information worker, but any number of different circumstances that are your day-to-day ongoing work. And that's really what we consider to be that inner loop. So who are those people that you're communicating with most regularly? What are those projects that you have ongoing that you're continually working on day after day? And how can you kind of chat somebody in a real-time environment to be able to get answers quickly to the questions that are most pertinent to your role? And so that is what we consider sort of our inner loop of communication. And this inner loop could be people that are internal. It can also be people that are external. So just like we have right now, you guys are able to join this meeting despite being external. And we could still use Teams to collaborate in that regard. The same can be said for anyone that you want to add sort of as a guest. So we can look at how you can add external guests to your team as well, if that should be a requirement that you guys have. And that can be done a few different ways. But really what this is for is sort of that ongoing quick communication, collaboration, and document sharing. Then the question people ask is, okay, well, what about Outlook? And oftentimes I get the question, well, are you guys going to be sort of discontinuing or moving away from Outlook? And no, that's not the case. It's absolutely sort of still core to what we're doing across the board in a number of these different organizations. But we do have specific kind of purposes for Outlook. So of course, one of them is going to be any personal information. So here around the targeted piece, I don't want to receive any information about, from HR about my employment status through Teams, because it's meant to be a sort of collaboration-based platform. I also might not have I might also have a customer who is going to be uncomfortable using Teams. And so how can we share messages that people can kind of reference back to in a long-term setting? In Teams, no, that's not the place. It would be Outlook. And so this is sort of ubiquitous for targeted communications, even one-to-many, where, say, Kevin Piesker, who's our president of Microsoft Canada, is reaching out to the team to let us know that something has come up or something we need to focus on. So another example here is just that once we've gone through this sort of return to work updates, we get an email every week from our team in Redmond at our headquarters to let us know where that's going through Outlook. We also have Yammer, and I'm not sure if anybody on the line is using Yammer or knows what Yammer is, even, because it's not a huge sort of area of focus for us at this time. Just because, well, organizations are getting up and running with with Microsoft Teams. Sometimes they will lose a little bit of traction with that Teams adoption if we're focusing in on Yammer as sort of another option for people to communicate. But what this is, if you've already rolled it out, is a social networking tool that can connect people across the organization. And so this is really that outer loop. In that outer loop, we might be able to do things like, say I'm running a session tomorrow on Windows Virtual Desktop, and I'm not the subject matter expert on that, and I don't know who is. It allows me to tap into a community that are interested in this that I may or may not know, so that I can kind of connect to broad scale across the organization. Another example is that I'm part of a Yammer group called Women at Microsoft. And so again, not at all important to my sort of everyday role here, but absolutely important to me sort of as an individual. So it might be something that I follow on Yammer, but isn't a regular update that I need to receive through Teams. At the center here, you see SharePoint, which is that sort of file store that's going to allow us to do that ongoing and continuous communication or collaboration, excuse me, and co-authoring, so that any updates that are happening across the organization are going to be made in real time for all. So that, excuse me, that's going to apply for anything, whether it's a document or a PowerPoint document or a Word document, whatever it is, that's going to be stored in SharePoint. And anytime that you create a new team in Microsoft Teams, that SharePoint site is going to get automatically generated in the back end. You can also take a SharePoint site that's existing and then turn that into a team. So it goes both ways. Now, there are a few exceptions for when SharePoint is going to be the backend for this, and I will show you those as we're kind of going through a demo. But essentially, those other two areas of storage that we have built in for a backend of Microsoft Teams are going to, well, we've got a few. We have OneDrive for chats and personal files that are being shared. We have Stream for any videos that are going to be shared. And then we have group and individual exchange mailboxes for any sort of chats or communications that are happening within the team environment, so that we could do things like follow up, we can make it auditable, and we could do things like retention policies where need be. So Teams is really a wrapper around all of these different services. And we use Office 365 groups to be able to control the group membership within each of these different platforms. I'll pause there. Are there any questions? Great, let's move on. Just a note here that when we were previously sort of, I think if you looked at Microsoft 10 years ago, everyone would associate us with tools meant for those information workers, and we've realized heavily that this leaves a significant amount of our market sort of unserved or underserved. And so if you have any questions about, as we go through here, what that experience would be like for the first line workers, so this could be anybody on a shop floor, it could be anybody, at a grocery store, or all of these different places where you're kind of dealing with a customer or product firsthand. We've come up with a number of ways to kind of make these platforms work for those individuals as well, and I'd be happy to speak to that. We also have workers that are really have specific industry requirements around compliance. And so this is something that we've also kind of worked to solve for. I probably won't get too much into our compliance suite and platform today, because I know that's generally something that comes with our E5 licensing. And I'm going to assume that most people kind of have an E3 type of agreement or an M365 agreement that wouldn't necessarily include that. But if you do have questions about how we're keeping information safe as we're sort of going through this, then let me know and I'm happy to speak to that. So what are we going to be going through today sort of as a whole? It will be a few different things. So we'll talk about Teams and its capabilities around meetings and callings. We'll talk about the ability to chat and to collaborate. And then we're also going to talk about how we can kind of extend Teams to the concept of Teams as a platform that I mentioned, where we look at extending this beyond just individual back and forth to say, okay, how can we bring in different Power Apps here, and how can we kind of use this platform for more than what it does sort of out of the box, so that it's custom to what we need, and so that we can do some automation in here with low code, no code development. So I'm going to start by kind of going over a little bit of an overview of what you see in the platform in terms of navigation. So we're going to go first over sort of starting our day, those collaboration spaces and how we can kind of customize them. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between those one-to-many or many-to-many conversations versus one-to-one conversations or one-to-many. We'll look a little bit about the back end of calendaring system, how this leverages from Exchange, and then also a little bit about the differences between Teams meetings and Teams live events when we get into scheduling for a broadcast. We could talk a little bit about calling. I know that all of you are probably going to be on different sort of voice plans, or may not have sort of anything set up right now with a voice plan. So if this is something of interest, I would encourage you to kind of re-engage with Able One so that you can kind of get up and running. But all this to say that I want at the end of our session for you to understand that basically Teams can really replace that desk phone system and helps people to be able to leverage their own equipment to kind of access that same excellent calling experience. And then lastly, we'll talk about files and sort of those different places that you're going to be able to store your files, and the fact that with Microsoft Teams, you don't necessarily need to think about where you're going to start this sort of where you're going to save this or where you're going to start your work. There's many options for different people depending on the style that they like to go at it, and we've made it we've made this accommodating for each of those different ways of work. Now you're going to notice obviously that all of this kind of surrounds around what we talked about today being kind of Office 365, Microsoft 365, and everything that I've just kind of covered with it is in more so Teams. And that's absolutely the case. But the reason that we do that is because Teams is really that sort of starting point for everything that we do within Microsoft 365. And so while it's not meant to be the only place that you're going to go in your day, it is meant to be the starting place. And increasingly, we're making these integrations so that you could do more and more from directly this pane of glass. So I'll start up at the top because this is really, like I said, the kind of first place that I go to start my day. You can see here that I'm going to get a notification from any time that somebody interacts with my message. So here I can see that Mark liked my message, Diana liked my message. I can also see if anybody has mentioned the general channel when I am a part of a team. So for example, here's our MTC industry channel where I have a notification from Sean. And you could see that he's tagged the entire channel that we're a part of. And so I'm going to get that notification in my inbox. I can also customize the notifications that are going to appear in this activity tab by clicking on this wheel up at the top and being able to kind of set some parameters around when I'm getting those notifications. And so in this case, you can see that my organization has set this by default to email me every hour if I have activity that I'm missing in Teams. And so this is a really great way for you guys to sort of start pushing your employees into Teams and increasing that adoption, because it forces them to, when they get that email, you know, you're curious about what you might have missed, and you can always click to kind of link back in. So this is really sort of my inbox of Teams, and that first place that I go to see where there's activity happening that's important to me. And you can see that most of this I've already seen. Next below here, we have the Teams environment, which is kind of core and absolutely, this is really, really important for the overall Teams experience. And you could see that I'm a part of a few teams that I'm kind of comfortable to share with you guys, again, because this doesn't really have any kind of customer specific information. But those are those teams that you see here up at the top. So the first one is our MTC Canada team, where I have a number of different sort of subdivided channels where that conversation could kind of break out as per specific themes. And so in my MTC channel, Canada, for example, I have general conversation where anything could be, career development, my solution area, et cetera, et cetera. One that I want to call attention to in this case is going to be this one that has the lock button next to it, because this is going to indicate to me that this is a private channel, which means that only those people who are invited to it specifically are going to be able to see what's going on in that team. And so I can see this channel, but if you weren't invited to this one channel, then it will not be visible to you. Here I am at, I like using my customer face just because they're ones that I own, teams that I own. So here you could see an example of this, where if I go into my team here and I want to add a channel, I'm going to have options on the privacy around that channel, so I could make it standard and available to everybody in the team. Or I could always make it, I could always make this private as well, which it is for some reason not showing up in that drop down, probably because I haven't done anything to add anybody in yet or to save this, but it absolutely is there in this drop down to be able to only allow certain people to see that information. You're going to see that I have the ability here to go ahead and create a team. But you can also lock down the ability for people to do that so that you're not going to have a crazy sprawl of 20 people going and creating a team for the same purpose. Another best practice is to control the naming conventions of those teams. And so here you have Women at Microsoft Canada. You don't want me going in and creating another team that's called Team Canada Women at Microsoft, because there's already that team and it creates chaos for other users and makes things confusing. And so what we've done there is allowed our administrators to put restrictions in terms of the naming conventions of those teams so that you don't have the problem where I'm going and creating a team called Satya Nadella Connect. The next thing that's important to note within any team is that they're going to be kind of two common elements regardless of the teams that I'm in. So the first one is going to be posts, which is going to be a chronological conversation thread where I can see not only those chats that have been had, but I can also see any meeting that's been held specifically in that team. So if I schedule a meeting in this team, anybody that's a member of the team is going to be able to join. And any conversations that happen in that meeting are going to be stored directly with that recording. So here you could see where my meeting was on Friday, June 19th. And here I could see the conversations that I was having in the meantime. So anyone that had any questions, I could just chat them. And so that's going to be the same case with the chat that's at the side of this meeting window. So it's all going to be stored together, which is super, super powerful when it comes back to getting context of what was discussed and for anyone who missed the meeting to be able to be brought up to speed. The next thing that you're going to see is the Files tab. And this is also going to be something that is universally available in any team that you create. And so I mentioned when we kind of did this initial walkthrough that anytime a team is created, a SharePoint site is going to be automatically generated in the background so that we have the ability to do co-authoring. And so anybody who's a part of this team is going to be able to access all of these different documents. And if I had some sort of say a Word document in here, I would be able to do co-authoring where I could kind of see someone else inside that document at the same time as me, and we're going to be able to both simultaneously make changes to that document. A question that I often get there is around version history, and we still do have that version history control, so you will be able to kind of revert to an initial version despite having that the co-authoring capabilities.
Just a question about that. That co-authoring capability. Are the cloud applications associated with Teams, do they have this full functionality? So an example would be PowerPoint. When you open up the PowerPoint app in Teams, does it have the full functionality as what PowerPoint 2019 would have?
Yes. So let me just go back and show you an example. I told you that a big area of our focus here is being able to ramp on helping customers to navigate their return to work so that people understand sort of what it's like to be in a hybrid work environment. Okay. And so here you can see my manager, Gladstone, who's tagging everyone on the team and telling us, please take the time to review this, make sure you're familiar with it, et cetera, et cetera. And then he's included this, this deck that's going to be also stored by default within the Files tab. So anytime it's added to the conversation, it's also going to be added to the files. So if I open this up, so instead, I will show you this one. Okay, so here's another one. So it's the same thing, reimagining workplace. How can we prepare for these different situations? I have the ability here to open this document in Teams, to open it in PowerPoint desktop app, which I've set to my default. So you could change that default. I just prefer the desktop. Or you can edit it in a browser. And regardless of where you do that, you're going to have the same experience. And so this is what it looks like in Teams. And here I could see my document with all of the same sort of formatting capabilities as you would see in any sort of other, in the desktop or web browser version. Does that answer your question?
It sort of does. So it actually presents the second question. So I can understand in the browser how you can manage the collaboration with that SharePoint capability. But if you're actually pushing it, you're showing it right now when you open in the actual desktop app. How does it allow for the multi-user of that document if you're actually opening it up on your computer? Is it always connected?
Yes, it's always connected because that's so that's because it's being stored on SharePoint Online, and because the Office 365 cloud platform is going to still sync with whatever we're doing to the cloud. So it doesn't matter if you're opening it up on a desktop app, it's still continuously syncing through that sort of shared cloud backend. So here I could see, for example, that my colleague Jasmine is also in the document. And so if I wanted to, I could always kind of go through here and see where she's working. So here she is right now.
Okay. And so when that user using their desktop app tries to save that document, will they have an option like to save as somewhere else, or does it always remain? Does it always keep that link back into Office 365 into Teams?
So anything that I do in the document right now is going to sync that master copy back to our the one that's being stored in Teams. So if I make a change here where I just say, I won't do this because this is an actual important thing that we're working on, and my colleagues will kill me if I make a change just for the sake of example here. But when I go in here, I have the option to save a copy. And then it's going to allow me these different locations to be able to save it. So if I save a copy of this down to, say, somewhere local on my PC or to my OneDrive, then that's going to be a different copy of this master document, and I can continue going on there and making any changes that I want to see, that I want to do.
Okay, so they can break the link. However, the document in its native form is always linked to Office 365. So if they don't save it, it doesn't go up. If they save a local copy, they essentially take an offline copy,
Sorry to interrupt you there. If they don't save it, it's going to automatically save because the O365 cloud, M365 cloud is going to allow that ongoing saving and automatically save it. If I choose to save a copy here, then I will be able to work on it, and you may or may not have, depending on where you're working on it, that auto save available. But if I go back up in here, you're going to see that when it's linked to that SharePoint Online, the auto save is going to be automatically on.
And that what's the frequency of the auto save for Office 365 then?
Infinite.
So immediate, like as soon as you make a change, it's saved?
Yeah, so let me just go and again, I feel bad for my team for doing this, but so if I say insert title here, before it was something, it said something else, and then I go on my Teams, and then I open this, open in Teams, oops, it's going to be there. Yeah, it's totally instant. I think the question that you have might be a little bit more, the question might be then, sorry, I'm just back in here. If I go into instead, file, why can't I see my cursor? Info. And then here I have different options in terms of, where is it? Version history. There's my cursor. Why isn't it showing? Then you could go back and see sort of each of these individual changes that anybody has made so that we could see it. So here you could see my version modified by me at 10:24 a.m. where I just said insert title here.
Thank you for going over that.
Yeah, no problem. Keep the questions coming because I want to make sure this is relevant to everyone. Okay, we can also communicate around a document. So if I'm working with on that document back in my Teams environment, and I respond to her here, that conversation is going to be continuously stored with the document itself. So for any changes that we're making to the document, hey, I'm working on this, it's going great. I'll have that once I pop back into Teams so that any changes that we're making are kind of consolidated within that document. Or it's beside that document, I should say. Now, I talked about the file storage for SharePoint Online sort of being the backend for the Teams experience, and that's absolutely true. But what about chat experience? And so here you could see that I am chatting with my friends, with my colleagues, Mike and Mark. And then I have our files tab here. And I've shared with them an agenda that we just did yesterday for Salvation Army. And so in this case, Salvation Army is, this is something that we're just sharing in our individual sort of, in our individual chat. So this is not going to be shared in SharePoint. It is instead going to be shared in OneDrive for Business. So if I open up my OneDrive for Business, and I scroll down here, you're going to see two different folders. Where is it? Teams chat files and Teams data. And so for anything that I chat with people in this Teams chat files, they're going to be stored within this folder for any of those individual chats that I have. And so the kind of concept here that I want you to think of is think of the difference between OneDrive for Business and SharePoint is that kind of shared filing cabinet that sits in your office that anyone can access at any time, and that the team leverages kind of communally. And then the OneDrive for Business is the stack of papers that are sitting on your desk that are only available to you. So you can you know that when you're sharing that out, somebody has to have the link to be able to access that versus everybody going in the team to be able to make those changes. If I go into files, however, this is going to pull up recent files that I've been working on regardless of where they're saved. So here you could see that I just opened up that Reimagine Workplace. Before that, I was working on my OneNote to prepare for today, and I was working on my Salvation Army agenda and the deck that I just covered. And so all of this is going to be available to me based off of chronological order, all within my Teams browser here. And so huge benefits of time savings. Where you're not thinking, oh wait, where did I save that? Was it my documents? What folder was it? Where do I pull that up? All of these things. You could just go to this tab and then you're going to have all of those files accessible to you instantly. We can also customize the teams. So I was kind of talking about the two tabs that we have here by default being our post file and our files tab. So let me see if I can find a good example to show you. So here you see that I have a tab. Obviously these two are going to be the same, But then we also kind of further customize this. And so in this case, we've actually included a Power App that is going to allow us to go through and request a change here. We've also included, what else? I haven't been in this team for a while, so I'm kind of going through this with you guys live. We have a Excel form. And we also have a planner board. So this is like exact same as like I'm not supposed to say this, but a Trello, where you can go in and assign cards to different people with different action items, different timelines, notes, checklist items, attachments, all of these things, so that we can have, for example, a to-do, on hold, almost there, and ready to go. And you can drag and drop these, which I will get in trouble for doing because I'm not supposed to mess around with this team, but from one to the other as you go through those different tasks. So this is called Planner, and it's an app that's going to be available to you. What other apps do we have available in here? So if I open this and I click on our plus button, all of these different first and third party apps are going to be here for you to kind of further customize or extend your team's workspace. And so this could be things like, just as an example, a Power App. It can also be things like a URL if you have an existing web app that you want to bring in here of your own. It could be a Power BI dashboard. It could be any number of these third-party applications that you could kind of pull in here at your discretion to customize that workspace.
Are there, helpful guides that say, this is what this application does, this is what this application does, or obviously it's like a storefront, right, that Microsoft is running, so all of these things are available. Mm-hmm. Is there a repository of knowledge that shows you kind of what they all do or what the options are?
Yeah, so if I go to the bottom here and it says apps,
yeah,
this is where you're going to get those summaries. And then it will also organize it here by topic, so that you could see the different things that are available and kind of understand. So, okay, I'm looking for something with project management. What do we have?
And all of these apps that are associated with Teams it's not like a subscription app outside that?
No, they're not all part of Teams. Some of them will require that subscription, but what we've done here is kind of enable that sort of single sign-on experience, and extending our cloud app protection to these applications to prevent things like data loss, to have things like data loss prevention in place with these different platforms.
Okay.
So if if I go in here and say, so this is a place to submit an app and check the status of your submission. Once approved by your IT admin, the app will be under this list. But you can't just, I can't just say, say I create an app tomorrow called Danielle's Amazing App. It's not like I could just say, okay, it's here now and everyone can use it. We do put those parameters in here to extend, to be able to extend that protection.
All the apps you've been walking us through today, are those standard with Teams, or are those additional add-ons, and is there an additional cost for any of the things you've been walking us through here?
So with oops, sorry, my computer came unplugged. So if I go into the following URL, here I am. I'm gonna go portal.office.com. Here you're going to see a selection of all of those apps that are going to come with your Microsoft 365 subscription. And so if I click in here, all apps, here are all the ones that you're going to have available, you're going to have access to with your existing subscription. So for me, for example, I have, I'm part of Microsoft. Obviously, I'm going to have a Dynamics 365, whereas for customers, that's going to require specific licensing. But you guys are not going to have access to all of, so for things that includes things like Yammer, Delve, whatever you have access to through your licensing and your IT department allows you to has deployed, you're going to see there. But you absolutely will not have access to all of these apps that are available through this app catalog just because you have access to Microsoft Teams, like with YouTube. Allow any Teams user to also have a premium YouTube account. It's just that it just means that we're allowing you to pull all of these different resources into that Teams environment more seamlessly, so that you can bring in those different applications and processes that you use in your day-to-day to this work environment.
Hi, Danielle. I just got one question for you.
Yep.
Okay, so being the admin of Office 365, how do we limit what end users see within those apps? Because say we don't want all of our end users having all these dine-in and YouTube and things like that. We want this limited within our workforce so that people don't have this option. How would you control that?
You would control that within the Teams Administrative Center. So we talked about Power Apps. I don't know why this isn't being responsive to the full size of my screen here, so apologies on that. But here you can look at a Power App that I've built to incorporate into this. And so this is an app that allows users to go in here and select between different device manufacturers if they want to request a new computer. And then they could choose a few different options and clear that selection, or in which case they're just going to uncheck, or go forward and compare them. And then they could see more information about each device. So this is just one example of a Power App that I've built that I've embedded in Teams. We'll come back to this probably later on this morning, but I just wanted to show you this as a sake of example. Okay, below here we have chat. I talked about the storage of our chat files being sort of different. We can also add different tabs to our chats as well. You have, of course, the ability to lock this down or to control sort of where and when people would be able to access those different apps. I've never really been a part of a team where we've embedded an app, because usually by the time it gets to that point of the collaboration cycle, we've created a team. Unfortunately, there's no way right now of being able to push a team to or a chat to a team. So here is an example. We had this ongoing chat where we were talking about where we were talking about this about one subject, and then you're going to see at the bottom here that I said, oh wait a second. Just thinking this seems like a big initiative, many people involved, any opportunity, any opposition to setting up a team and sharing the resources in there, we would be able to add people more easily, since there are multiple people in this team or in this chat. And so at that point, we were able to push this to be a team. Also within the chat, we have capabilities of translation. I'll show you that in a second in our meeting chat as well. Below this, we have our calendaring system. So regardless of the platform that you're using, if it's Teams or it's Outlook, this is going to be exactly identical. And that's because both of them are using Exchange as the calendaring system. And so I have every capability I do within Outlook to be able to set up a meeting directly within Teams. That meeting I would set up via this window at the top. So here I would be able to either say meet now, in which case I could start, this is going to push me on hold if I go through the process, so I won't show you this, but meeting with Danielle Thomas, and then I can invite somebody in if I wanted to, controlling my PC and my speakers, any audio, if I have a room that I'm connected to, and then the ability to turn my camera on or off so that I could preview background filters. I can also schedule a meeting for a later date by clicking into new meeting here, where I can add in a title, add in some required attendees. So I'll add in Diana, and I'll add in Christine. And once I've done that, I can always go into my scheduling assistant to be able to see when everybody is busy, or when we might be able to have this meeting. So from here, I'd be able to send that meeting invite, of course. I'll close it for now. Discard. I'll call out here that we also have the ability within this meeting space to not only schedule a meeting, but also schedule a live event. And so the difference between a meeting and a live event is a meeting is a two-way dialogue that happens between anyone who is on the call. So anyone on this call could bring themselves off mute at any time and be able to ask a question. Whereas a live event is a one-to-many broadcast where there is designated people internally that will be either the producer or the presenter. So if I go in here and I select and I type in again, Diana, then I could make Diana the presenter and I would be the producer, in which case she would only be able to open up content on her screen and use her either third-party device headset or her computer audio visual to be able to present. Whereas I would be controlling the actual flow of that presentation and deciding whose screen and whose content gets shared out at once. So it helps for a situation where we're all globally dispersed and we need to make an important announcement to many people without them bringing themselves off mute and asking questions. So in the live event, it's a one-to-many conversation. You can certainly ask questions through a moderated Q&A option that comes with this, but you cannot just kind of bring yourself off mute. The Teams meetings can handle up to 250 people. I think that's increasing. That might be an old limit, but it's in and around there. Whereas the live event can hold up to hundreds of thousands. So if I wanted to click in here, I could just call it test. Set this up. I have the option with live events to invite specific people or specific groups by invite, where it's going to require permissions. I could do an organization-wide event that everyone can look at without signing in, and I can also do a public-facing event if you ever want to do a public broadcast or a webinar. And then down here at the bottom, I have different options in terms of being able to get an attendee engagement report. So how many people were in your meeting? When did they drop? When did they join? And I can live caption and have that live caption translated to up to 6 languages. And I always like to call out to customers as I'm going through here that we even have Klingon. So I have no idea why that was a priority to put this in here. But if anyone's, is it Star Wars or whatever it is, then you can go ahead and answer that Klingon. It's also going to, once I schedule this, put in a give me a link that I can distribute, as opposed to being able to invite people individually to that meeting. And so with that, with the link, I can always switch that link out if I use a bit.ly or some other sort of link shortening service, so that I'm not sending out multiple links in the event that something goes wrong with how I've initially set this up. But for now, let's talk about the actual live meeting itself. And I will use the one that we have here to kind of go through some of this. And so this is obviously the meeting window. You guys should have sort of a similar view on your side, but you might not have all of the same features necessarily, just depending on when they've rolled out to your tenant. Obviously at Microsoft, I'm kind of on the latest and greatest here so that I can show you guys all these features. So apologies if you are not seeing the exact same view that I am. Right now, if I go into a conversation window, you could see that anybody at any point during this meeting can chat and add in a combo. For some reason, it's been lagging on my side for a little bit with because I'm in Europe, but there's a little bit of a lag of when that sends. But if I do go back into my Teams window here, you're also going to see that chat in your chat window at the side here. So, no, which one was it? Here. I can go in and view the chat of my meeting here as well. And I could say, hey guys, hope this is useful. And you guys will be able to see that message and then go in and interact with it if you want to like it or whatever you want to do. I can set a delivery option. So, sorry, can everyone mute, please? Thanks. So that you could go in here and be able to set delivery options. So this is going to notify everybody that this is urgent. I can add a GIF, sticker, or emoji if I wanted to as well. I can also take advantage of amazing language translation right now. So if I go in to my browser here and just pull something, because I don't speak any other languages very well, but let's say French, English to French. say, hey guys, I hope this is helpful to you. Please like this. And then I copy it and I put it into my Teams window. Here's my message. Zoom in a bit. And then I could go into the 3 dots here above that message. Translate. It will detect that language that I'm using out of the bat. Hi guys, I hope it's useful for you. Please like this if so. And then you guys can go in and all like that if that translation works. So this translation works right now with over 60 different languages and is very accurate in terms of its quality. So we want to, it's important to note there, I don't know if any of you guys have sort of international teams, but awesome if you do, to be able to kind of take advantage of that feature. That live captioning and live transcription is also happening in the background right now with this recording. And so show transcript, my mistake. So here, the transcript has been automatically generated for this entire meeting, where you can go back and see what was discussed. And so after this is available, it's going to be stored with the recording of this call and is actually going to be fully searchable as well. So if you guys are going back afterwards and there's a question you asked or some information that you wanted to sort of double back on, you'd be able to search this by keyword so that you could quickly pull up what you missed instead of having to kind of play this back at ×3 playback speed or something like that to try and get that information. If I didn't want that recording of those words, but I did want to help out with people that were audiovisual impaired, we also have live captions, which I've turned on at the bottom of the screen now. So you guys should be able to see that, which is recording in context, by the way. So if it makes a mistake about what I am saying here and it detects that it was wrong based off of the context of the rest of the conversation, you're going to see that it will backtrack and be able to correct its original transcription for what I'm saying now. So that's pretty cool. We have the raise hand functionality, which is going to allow me as the sort of, or whoever organized that meeting, or in general, anyone will be able to see participants that have raised their hands so that I can ask or answer your question without necessarily having you to come off mute and interrupt the flow of the presentation. We also have a number of great features around sort of the video components here. So I'll turn on my screen so that you can. So sorry for that background noise. So here I am, and if I wanted to, I can always turn on my background effects. And so you could see that I have any number of different backgrounds that I've uploaded here. I also did some custom ones. I'm a huge fan of The Office. So if I switch out for this one, I can act as though I'm in the sort of interview room that they use, but you guys can, of course, block this if you don't want people to be uploading their own custom backgrounds, and you can always deploy certain ones as well if you want them to be in sort of front of a corporate branded one, for example. Is there a question? Guess not. When we have these, so one of the questions that we got a lot over the course of COVID, of course, was around having everybody visible at the same time. I think that was like something that kind of came from the Zoom side of things, which we rapidly worked to get up and running. And so now we have, of course, the gallery mode, which is going to show for the setting that we're in right now. But we also have the ability to do a together mode, which will be familiar to anybody who's been watching the NBA basketball finals, because this is exactly how we are streaming the audiences for each of those games. And so you might have noticed at the side, there's the Microsoft Teams logo on the side, and it's because we are doing it just like this. And okay, so there it detected my other background, which is pretty cool. But you can see that it's going to actually superimpose all of us. If someone else turned on your camera, it would also be able to superimpose you into the same environment. So we're all kind of sitting together. And I thought at first that was kind of, what's the point of this? But then my colleague kind of pointed out to me that they actually did studies on people's ability to focus, where everybody's kind of in one location. Hey, how's it going? There we have a friend now, so I'll turn mine back on too. So now we can kind of sit together through the course of this meeting as opposed to being in our own locations, which actually minimizes the amount of distraction and allows people to focus more effectively, as we've kind of proven through a few commission studies. Turn mine off. We have the ability now also, is it in here? It doesn't look like it is yet, but we also have a new feature that's recently been announced called breakout rooms, which is basically side conversations that can take on in the same meeting. So say that we're working through this meeting and Diana says, Danielle, I'm really stuck on this idea that you had around private chats. Can we discuss? And I say, yep, and you guys can kind of continue on with this conversation, and I could go into a separate breakout room with Diana to talk about that, where we're still being attached to this main bridge, which is pretty cool. Of course, we have the share screen, hide screen, our mute buttons. All of this should be familiar to you guys. Just a few things to kind of, this is really the last component that we were going over with Teams. You can see here that it's my calling feature. This is basically the same ability that we have to be able to kind of go and just dial someone individually as opposed to kind of formally setting up a meeting. You're going to have all the same capabilities here in terms of transcription, live captioning, being able to record your call, all those things, in addition to being able to see those contacts who you've been calling most recently. And so here you'll see all of the contacts that, all the, I guess I haven't set this up really because I don't use it very often, but I also have my call history so you could see all of those people I've chatted with in the past. I can also look at my voicemail. So if anyone wanted to, they could leave me a voicemail message too. And of course I could customize that greeting so that it would say whatever I want it to.
Danielle, the voicemail feature, is it also included with like the base Teams license, or do you need the extended like Office 365 voice for that?
Yeah, I can answer this one. You would need a business voice license in order to get the voicemail up and running.
Thank you.
And sorry, just one more question.
Yep.
Sorry about that. So with the ability of making phone calls, can this be used as like a soft phone with like a Cisco SIP connection, or is this only just for using like with conference more or less with your conference license?
It could be used as a full voice system and a soft phone, yes.
So with like the enterprise license, as he was stating, that would there'd be different packages probably for using it as a soft phone for external calls, and then that would replace desk phones and stuff?
Exactly. Yep. So mine's not enabled right here, but you will have a dialer. So here's the admin center. And if I go down into the Teams admin center, here you can see, where is it? So one, call quality dashboard, so that you can see how those calls are performing and if there are any sort of issues. Why is it making me log in to access this if I'm already logged in? But the other one that's kind of important is if you go into planning, network planner. This will help you to kind of work to optimize your network based off of the sort of the number of employees that you have and those different factors that will become important when you're addressing your network and optimizing it as well. So this would be a good place to kind of look because it's going to give you some recommendations around that. And then the same would go for if I look at like locations, network topology, and networks and locations. This will kind of help you plan that out because it could be a network issue that you're having that latency from. And hopefully by kind of poking around in some of that, as well as these analytics and reports, you'd be able to get a little bit more insight about why specifically that's happening to your tenant. Because obviously I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this, I'm actually taking this call from Europe. And so for me, I haven't had, I think, aside from when I accidentally hung up on myself, I don't think there's been sort of any kind of connectivity issues. So it's probably, it might be to do with your network, and that might be something you want to check out.
Thank you.
Just while I'm in this admin center, I wanted to kind of walk you through this as well, because there were some questions around sort of how we turn things on and off. So here we can kind of look at the different teams. And by the way, unfortunately, this isn't the best place to kind of show you this because this is a demo tenant that pretty much no one uses. And so it's going to be not populated with existing policies, etc. So I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a blind demo here, but you can see here that those different teams that I have. So in this case, we just have one team. It's called Contoso. I can look at the channels that are in that, and here you can see again just that general channel and then the settings. And so is this where I control those apps? Add, edit, or remove tabs would be here. Add, edit, or remove apps would be here. Add, edit, move connectors, etc. So you can kind of customize what they're going to have access to based off of this. We can also set up policies for these teams. And so in this case, we only have one sort of policy that's here. But if I did want to add, it should have policy packages that are available that are going to be sort of pre-built for you based off of rules and regulations. It might be living somewhere else in this. That is going to be pre-built off of rules and regulations that are going to impact different industries. So, oh, it's here, policy packages. So for example, healthcare clinical worker is going to have a very specific set of requirements that they're going to be given by the governments. And so we've actually gone ahead and kind of pre-populated this for you with all of those different policies and rules so that you have rules about what they can measure, meetings, app setup, and so this would probably be the how you're making those apps available to them. But all of these things are going to be kind of pre-built for you so that you can actually apply these policies all together for those different common industries. We can set up different devices. So nothing really to kind of call out here. I guess the phones thing would be kind of important because there were some questions around that. Unfortunately, this isn't going to have any information in here because we didn't configure this across a voice. But we also have Teams rooms, which is basically the availability for the teams to use proximity join to be able to recognize when you're located close to one of these meeting rooms and then automatically ask you if you want to join it. So you can transfer that meeting to it. Information around emergency addresses. So if anyone's going to be calling out like 911, then you can kind of stop that, as well as, again, looking at those networks. We can look at different users and assign individual policies to each of these users. Of course, if you're going to be doing this at an organizational wide level, though, this individual policy would be ineffective and you would want to use some sort of groups to be able to apply those policies to sort of different types of individuals as opposed to individually. But if I here and look at an individual user and see sort of what they've done in terms of meetings, what they've done in terms of calls, the quality of those calls that they've been experiencing. And so again, this might be a good one for you to kind of look at if you're going to be addressing those issues of latency, because it might give you some valuable insight. And then we could look at sort of different voice settings if we have allowed them setting and when we're going to let them have history, and then we can also look at any policies that have been applied to these people. We can set up the ability for people to have conference bridges, set policies for meetings. So maybe it's no recordings, maybe it's no custom backgrounds, meeting settings. So I'm not sure what this is. Whether people can join, whether they can join, the URL that they're going to be sent to, all of these types of things, as well as live events settings and policies. Same goes for messaging. Teams apps, and so we talked about these different apps, so this is great, I think, to touch on. This is where you're managing for them to which apps you're going to have available, and so you could definitely go in here and then be able to block or a sort of whitelist any type of application that you want available to them or don't. And then here with the licenses, the apps for which any service subscriptions were purchased will be listed as purchased. However, they will be listed as purchased now if there are any plans that are available. So I have a feeling that that's only going to be for Microsoft applications, unless they because it looks like here they're not going to allow me to purchase anything from this account. It could just be because there's no credit card attached to this account too. So I'm not totally sure on that one. But we do also have permission policies. So who are we going to allow to access these apps, and under what circumstance? Are we going to set some sort of conditional based access policies, as well as setup policies? We could look at the different voice commands that we could set up here. So involving caller ID, policies, the ability to have auto attendance, queues, and park. We also have voice routing. So if your assistant wants to answer that first, you have the ability to kind of do that. Policy packages I covered, and then analytics and reporting. You can kind of see here, it's not really going to be a very helpful dashboard here, because unfortunately, like I said, this is only used by people that are doing my using this environment for something else. But if I click apps usage, no data available, unfortunately. You'd be able to see all of this information. And I think is going to be this Teams Advisor tab. So underneath planning. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to pre-populate a planner board for you. You'll recall we looked at the planner board in one of the teams that I showed. That's going to give you practical advice in order of priority of how you should actually go about deploying this. And so, for example, say you're in the process of upgrading from Skype to Business. I could click into this and say next. Sorry. I can add any team members that need to kind of be a part of this. And then it's actually going to assign me tasks for every single step that I need to do before I have that full rollout of Skype for Business. So it could be things as minute as, well, that's kind of important. So enhance your service. And so after you've successfully deployed Teams, your operating service with it will give you all of this information about what the description is. It will give you an actionable checklist of items that you need to achieve in order to do that. And it's going to link you out to help resources and articles so that you can actually see more about each of these. And then of course you can assign that to anybody on your team so that they're going to get that notification and that they're going to have sort of timeline that's going to be attached to this. So when you're looking at, even things like, okay, well, we're having issues with this connectivity. Is it something that we've done here? You can always look back into this sort of planner board to be able to determine where that error happened or where you went wrong, to be able to isolate down and really understand what happened more specifically. So that's sort of it from the Administrative Center. I want to switch gears now and show you a little bit about Power Platform. And then in like half hour or so, I'll give you 30 minutes of your time back today. So what are those different components of Power Platform? You're going to see them in front of you here. The kind of first on the very far left side, Power BI. This is usually the most familiar to our customers. I think it's been around the longest. But this is a business analytics dashboarding tool that allows you to build dashboards that will read from any number of different and disparate data sources in real time to be able to allow those customers to kind of deep dive into that data and pull any number of different insights into it. So a lot of functionality here, and something that we could definitely cover with you if you're ever interested in sort of a follow-up session with the MTC. The next you're going to see is Power Apps, and we have two types of Power Apps. We have the Canvas application and the model-driven application. The Canvas application is like a mix between PowerPoint and Excel, where you're dragging and dropping different components onto a sort of blank canvas that looks almost like a PowerPoint screen. And then from there, you can kind of go back in and then decide how you want each of those different kind of components to interact with one another. So that is a lot more creative and a lot more based around user experience, but a lot less structured in terms of your data. The Canvas-driven application could be built off of any different backend. And so this could include free with your Office 365 subscription, things like a SharePoint list or an Excel form. But if you are building a model-driven app, you can only use the backend that comes natively with, which is the Common Data Service, and you'll see this down at the bottom. On the opposite side of things, the model-driven app is a lot more structured. and a lot less beautiful, but a lot more suitable for sort of enterprise-wide or scalable circumstances. And that's because it's very, it runs sort of automatically for you. So it's a lot better for sort of complex processes. We have Power Automate, which is going to be sort of an if this, then that sort of chain of command, which will spark any sort of subsequent actions or activities based off of an initial trigger event, which could include some sort of interaction with your O365, or it could include somebody pressing a button, and can get very, very robust and complex in terms of how we're able to, what we're able to trigger. Not only including, of course, those platforms within your O365 environment, but also including external platforms as well. If you use things like even Twitter or Dropbox or Box or Google Drive or whatever else it is that you're using. We have Power Virtual Agents, which is like our intelligent chatbot service. And this is how you can build a bot to be able to offboard any sort of frequently asked questions from, say, your IT help desk to our artificial intelligence, which will answer those questions for you. We have data sources, which will allow you to tap into different data sources regardless of where they're living. And the AI builder is something that will do like object recognition, text recognition, image recognition, etc., that you can kind of build into that so that some of this is kind of automated for you. And then lastly, of course, is the common data service, where we can simply store all of this data. So think of it as a cloud or a SaaS version of a SQL server. That's going to be able to be the native backend of any model-driven application, and also the native backend of Dynamics 365. So if you're familiar with Dynamics 365, the model-driven apps will be familiar to you. What does this look like on the backend? Sorry. Might take a second to load here, so I apologize. So here you can see the backend, and this is the Canvas application. You can kind of see why I said it's a mix between PowerPoint and Excel, where you're able to design your app in this sort of screen here, and then choose the different components of that application to apply different formulas to. So say if I wanted to change something with my manufacturer gallery, which is here at the side, I can select the different components here, and then a different formula is going to come up in any case. I can also switch between different screens, and you're kind of going to be able to see a very user-based or flow based off of that user experience that you can kind of follow along. Up here at the top, we can play our app at any time to kind of see what it looks like to get that sneak peek. On the opposite side, this is going to be the Canvas-driven application, or sorry, the model-driven application. And you're automatically going to see how it's very, very different on the back end from the Canvas app. And so what this is going to be comprised of, instead of sort of that what you see is what you get, is a very modular flow for an once initial interaction occurs. Here you go. You can kind of see a little bit better now. So you can kind of see this step-by-step order of what's going to happen here. So this is the back-end process in the case of our device request app that I just showed you, where we're going to basically look at sort of once that device is requested and somebody's asked for a new device, we're going to check the date, the approval status, and the price. From here, we're going to run a switch based off of the price condition to see if it will be approved or not within that capital. We're going to be able to place the device order and receive the device, as well as distribute the device at the end of this. And you can click in to see the details along each step of the way. So those are two very integrate with kind of extend to truly make it Teams as a platform.